You won't believe how close we came to losing her, and how blind one person's obsession with rules can make you to real life. The sirens started out like hope, a distant wail growing louder until red and blue lights painted our living room walls. Inside, my wife's breathing had grown alarmingly shallow. Outside, an ambulance idled at our gate, stuck. My heart pounded like I'd run a marathon, and I knew in that moment that rules don't care if you're dying. They're just lines in a book. When we moved into this gated neighborhood, rows of manicured lawns, trimmed hedges like soldiers at attention, an HOA board so strict they might have a military rank in their head, I thought it was the American dream. But behind the picket veneer, it was a monarchy of bylaws. And the Queen? Karen. Clipboard in hand, voice sharper than a gavel. She wasn't there because she was kind or fair, because she talked loudest. A hall monitor mixed with a tax auditor, armed with fines instead of detention slips. My wife uses a wheelchair and depends on an oxygen concentrator. Ada laws should have protected her, but Karen wasn't messing around with that. She fined us for installing a wheelchair ramp. Architectural disharmony, she said. Threatened us over a medical supply van parked by our house. Fined us for painting the front door too hospital-like. She did the same to everyone else. An elderly neighbor's tiny skateboard ramp. A mum's stroller marks on the sidewalk. But the difference was we weren't a parking violation. My wife was alive, and this Queen treated breathing like bureaucracy. So I started building a case. Civil service compliance oversight runs in my veins. I quietly requested an emergency override install, the kind fire departments rely on. Denied. Reached out to the county fire marshal. Found out the HOA ignored warnings, cut corners, lied about maintenance, funneled gate contracts to Karen's nephew's security company. But I kept it quiet. I needed time. My wife needed peace. That night, we watched an old movie. She laughed at cheesy lines, but I noticed she was breathing lighter than usual. She brushed it off so I didn't push too hard. But later, her oxygen tank looked shamefully half empty. By 9:30, I knew something was wrong. I called her doctor, off to the ER. At 10, her chest tightened, lips paling. I called 911. Moments stretched into eternities. When I heard sirens, relief washed over me. They were here, only they weren't moving. I ran outside to find the ambulance motionless at the gate. EMTs pounding the steel, waving, and blocking them. Karen. Clipboard poised, lips pursed in smug delight. Inside, my wife was fighting for each breath. Every second was ticking off like a bomb. I grabbed the portable oxygen supply, clamped the mask, whispered, "Hang on!" I ran back outside, EMTs shouting, demanding access. But Todd, the guard, a kid barely 20s, looked frozen. Karen sneered, "No unauthorized vehicles after 10. Rules are rules." She treated my wife's life like a noise complaint. Time fractured. I pulled Todd aside, told him, "You're not liable for opening this gate in a medical emergency. You will be if you don't." Karen snapped at him. She cared more about her nephew's contract than people living. Todd teetered near the switch. His eyes screamed. She shouted, held the switch. I leaned closer. "You're obstructing emergency medical services. That's a felony." She pulled out her phone, recording it like a trophy. Inside the house, the alarm shrieked. Oxygen saturation plummeting. I sprinted back outside. EMTs readied themselves to treat her in the driveway if necessary. Intubation kit, ventilator on standby. But every minute that passed fell like a weight across my chest. 9 minutes. 9 agonizing points between life and death. Neighbors peeked out. Mr. Alvarez. Priya, all of them holding their breath. Whispers rippled. Why won't they open the gate? Inside, my wife's saturation dipped into the red. The alarm's chirp was a scream in my brain. I looked at Karen, frozen in her posture of power, and I realized this wasn't petty anymore. It was criminal. I called County Fire Battalion Chief directly, told him ambulance stuck at Oaksgate HOA, wife coding, needed breach authorization, seconds against us. He didn't hesitate. Rescue team inbound to cut open that gate. Karen realized she'd pressed the wrong man. She stood in front of her SUV like a martyr. Fire truck arrived. Captain called, "We're breaching." She planted herself, screaming property rights. I stepped between her and steel blades, telling her bluntly, "If you want to stand in front of steel and fire, be my guest, but you won't stop this." A hush fell. Sparks flew as hydraulic cutters met iron. Phones flashed. The crowning moment. I pulled out my federal badge, Department of Justice, Deputy Attorney General for Civil Rights, Special Counsel Emergency Access. The crowd inhaled as the steel gave way. When the gate swung open, EMTs rushed in. I jumped inside. My wife lay pale and fragile. EMTs worked in calm frenzy, bagging, intubating, stabilizing. I held her hand. She squeezed weakly, and then numbers started climbing. Breath returned. I breathed again. "Karen!" She collapsed to the curb. Tears streaked mascara on her face. Not the triumphant finisher, but the defeated queen of bylaws. I rode with my wife to the ER. They said it was too close, but she'd make it. The next day I walked into court, not grieving, but armed with authority. Emergency injunction filed, obstruction of EMS, ADA violation, negligence. Judge signed it before his coffee cooled. HOA's power suspended, county receiver assigned, board stripped. Emails and ledgers revealed contracts funneled to nephew's company. Gate override disabled on purpose, ambulance call-out fees exploited, extortion dressed as maintenance. That night, the clubhouse was a battlefield for truth. Residents fed up finally spoke. Neighbors who'd lived under fear now roared. I looked around. All the people who Karen ruled through petty fines, quiet humiliation, driven by ego. I told them, peace built on fear isn't peace. The crowd erupted in approval. Court-mandated fail-open gate system, ADA compliance, board overhaul, restitution. Insurance cancelled unless instant compliance. And for Karen, no prison. Instead, 200 hours pushing wheelchairs at the county rehabilitation hospital. Irony at its most poetic. The woman who once banned ambulances now listened to heart monitors. The backup plan wasn't vengeance, it was accountability. Weeks later, she pushed a patient's wheelchair, eyes on the floor. I almost pitied her. But some lessons must be paid in tears. Home, my wife recuperated. She squeezed my hand. "You saved me," she whispered. I told her, "You saved me." And her eyes glowed with that quiet strength I remembered when all we had was hope. That neighborhood changed. The gate was gone, replaced by real access for emergencies. Neighbors didn't fear fines anymore. They planted flowers, helped each other, smiled without suspicion. Silence was no longer suffocating. It was healing. From the driver's seat, I looked at that new gate. It opened wide for ambulances, not because of bylaws or boards, but because people demanded it. And Karen, the clipboard queen, was just a shadow behind it. I learned that night that rules without humanity become cages, and power without compassion turns communities into prisons. But when someone stands between life and bureaucracy, the blind illusions of authority shatter, brick by brick, and truth walks through. So share this story. Let it remind everyone. Don't let rules blind you. When lives hang in the balance, don't wait for permission. Act, because humanity doesn't need approval. If this moves you, let me know where you're listening from. Let's make sure empathy is always louder than rules.